Previously on Unscripted.
I have only one honorable mention. Only one.
Go ahead.
Do you know the song Tequila by the Champs?
Well, I mean, there's only one word in the song.
Exactly.
It's tequila.
You're listening to Unscripted with Skip Sherman and Josh Obadia.
Okay, Skip, so today we're going to talk about alternate nicknames, and we'll explain what that is in a minute. But do you remember we did an episode, I don't know how long ago it was, where we talked about rewatchable movies, you know, when they come on television?
Yeah, rewatchable. That was honestly one of our best episodes and most well received. We got so much feedback about that. Everyone loves that topic because everyone loves to watch movies.
So I went back and looked at my list, and it's a good list, but a movie came on television recently that I watched, I don't know when, and I'm like, oh, I should have totally put this on my list, and I went back and looked, and it wasn't on my list. So I'd like to now add it onto my list today, if I'm allowed.
Please, yes, rewatchable. Let's hear it.
It's Slapshot, which you're going to laugh, but Slapshot is such a good movie, and I had not seen it in a while. It's so politically incorrect. Like, there's no way they could make this movie today, I don't think.
Impossible.
But it should have totally been on my list of rewatchable movies. It was hilarious. I was laughing out loud.
But it's not on TV that much, is it? Is that maybe that's part of the reason why we didn't think about it? Because it's not like one that you have rewatched so often, but you wish maybe you could.
So it wasn't on regular network television because they'd have to bleep everything out. It's on one of those movie channels where they don't bleep anything out. That's where I saw it.
Right. Oh, no, you can't. That movie cannot be made today. Impossible. Yeah, absolutely
but
impossible.
It's a great movie. It's just a great movie.
That's a topic for another day. I don't know how we would do it, but there's so much stuff that they couldn't do today that was even from 20 years ago or whatever, right?
Agreed. So I understand we made a mistake on our last episode.
We did. Well, I did, and it was very subtle. It's such a mistake that I didn't even realize it was a mistake.
I'm so curious to hear this.
I talked about in karaoke songs. I talked about from the movie Grease, and I said that the name of the song is called "Summer Lovin'."
But it's actually called what?
It's actually called "Summer Nights."
Okay, I see. I didn't know.
Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
In my mind, it's just "Summer Lovin'," but
do they ever say "Summer Nights" in the song?
Yeah, the big ending is, oh, those summer nights, right?
Oh, that's right. Yes. Okay. Clearly, I haven't heard the song in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason, that's the title. But anyways, I just thought that was funny because in my mind, Summer Lovin' is just what it's called.
How did you figure out that you made the mistake?
Well, when I was looking for the clip of the song to include in the podcast, I realized I found out what the real name was, and I was like, oh man, I screwed up.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And we don't have any listener mail, but we do have our good buddy, ChatGPT.
Before you say the ChatGPT list, I have to say something about ChatGPT. I listened to a podcast about ChatGPT this week, or maybe last week. And I don't know about you, but I'm a little bit nervous about this thing. I saw the movie The Terminator. I know what happens, and I know it's just a movie, but
yeah.
I feel like this might actually happen one day, and we're going to be taken over by the machines.
It is scary. There's a lot of warnings. If you read a lot of news, there's people that are like, this isn't good. And I don't think it's getting towards the machines are taking over the world type of situation like the Terminator, but Skynet, in the Terminator. But I
know.
But what is scary now is the disinformation, right? Because ChatGPT is only one thing, but there's other AI programs that will create images and videos, right? I can say, give me a picture of Josh Obadia sitting on meeting Queen Elizabeth, and it's going to give me that freaking picture.
Or you can say Josh shooting someone and murdering someone.
Yes, exactly. So that's kind of the scary part. And, we never talk about so much serious stuff, but, we're living in a world of such disinformation already. There's so much out there, and this is only going to add to that. So it's kind of scary. But, I didn't ask ChatGPT if it was going to become Skynet. I asked it, what are the best karaoke songs?
I'm curious to hear what it said.
So as long as we're keeping it friendly with Mr. ChatGPT, I think we'll be okay. So this is what it answered. The best karaoke songs can vary depending on personal preferences and the audiences you're singing for. However, here are some popular and widely enjoyed karaoke songs that often get people singing and having a great time. Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, Sweet Caroline by Neil Diamond, Don't Stop Believing by Journey, I Will Survive, Gloria Gaynor, Livin' on a Prayer, Bon Jovi, Hey Jude, The Beatles, I Wanna Dance with Somebody, Whitney Houston, Wonderwall, Oasis, Billie Jean, Michael Jackson, and then Like a Prayer by Madonna, Love Shack, the B-52s, and My Way by Frank Sinatra. Now, you'll notice there's a lot of songs that we included that ChatGPT mentions, so it's kind of cool. And then ChatGPT goes on to say, remember, the best karaoke song for you is the one that you enjoy singing and can connect with emotionally. Choose songs that suit your vocal range and style, and don't be afraid to have fun and engage with the crowd.
You know, ChatGPT sounds like such a nice person.
Or maybe the opposite. Maybe just like the most fake friend that you ever had. Like someone who's just always going to try to tell you like the right thing to do, even if they don't mean it. Like it's very, very weird, so.
It is very weird. We'll be right back after this to talk about alternate nicknames.
You're listening to Unscripted.
Are you taking a month-long vacation in the stratosphere and you know how hard it is to hold your breath? Are you the cosmic kid in full costume dress? You've got a nice little place in the podcast universe with Set Listing Bruce. Set Listing Bruce is your podcast for all things Bruce Springsteen fandom. We discuss his music, we talk about his tour, and we also talk to fans of other musicians and share their story of their passion, their fandom, and the way that their favorite artist music makes them feel. Set Listing Bruce, a Bruce Springsteen fan podcast, is available wherever you find podcasts. Remember, there is magic in the night.
And now, back to Unscripted.
Okay, Skip, we're back.
So you texted me, actually, wow, we actually had this topic picked like a while ago. We've never had so much time to prepare. Usually, honestly, like I'm giving behind the scenes, but like we record on Saturday morning and we're only usually picking the topic on Thursday.
When did we decide? I don't remember when we decided on this topic.
I think it was just like 2 days after we recorded last time. Like,
oh, because I just sent you a random text message saying, hey, do you ever want to do this topic? And then you said, sure, let's do it next episode.
Yeah. So maybe like, do you want to explain like what alternate nicknames is?
I will happily explain it because I'm sure no one understands. So every sports team has a nickname. Like for the Montreal hockey team, it's the Canadiens. I refer to the word Canadiens as their nickname. The Montreal baseball team, they were called the Expos. So, but a lot of teams, in fact, maybe every team, but a lot of teams have like an alternate nickname. So it's not really their official nickname. You won't really find any clothing usually that has this word on it, but everyone refers to them as that. So for like the Montreal Canadiens, it's the Habs. And I don't know, I've never really seen a t-shirt or anything that says Habs on it, but maybe they do exist.
Not official stuff, but
right.
Unofficial, guaranteed there is. Yeah.
Right. So that's what I mean by alternate nicknames. Like the Toronto Maple Leafs, some people call them the Buds. I can go on and on, but I don't want to give you my actual list. These ones are not on my list.
Yeah, I'm glad you gave the example. Like when we were in Vegas last year, it happened to be exactly during the NFL draft, right?
Right.
And as we were walking down the strip in Vegas, I had my Philadelphia Eagles hat on, and I couldn't walk for 1 minute without another Eagles fan passing me by saying, "Go Birds, go Birds, go Birds." Anytime I pass an Eagle, it's like an Eagles fan, and we looked at each other, "Go Birds." So like Birds, I guess, is like the unofficial nickname of the Eagles, although, I mean, do people call them that? I don't know. Maybe it's a lot of times it's stuff that's created by like the press, that follows the team, right?
Right. I was reading a little bit about it, and a lot of reporters, sometimes they wanted to shorten the nickname when they're typing, so they tried to think of something that's shorter.
Yeah.
Like, for
There's a lot of
example,
bad
I'll
ones.
give you a few other examples that are not on my list. The Baltimore
Mhm.
Orioles, people call them the O's. The
Exactly.
Seattle Mariners, people call them the M's. The Golden State
Right.
Warriors, people call them the Dubs.
Right. St. Louis Cardinals, the Redbirds.
Right,
Or,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah.
and by the way, let me just say that I have picked my top 5 nicknames. It doesn't mean that I like these teams, just to be clear.
Oh, you're gonna see my list and you're gonna be in shock because there are teams on my list that I hate. Like
Right.
literally hate.
Yes,
And
exactly.
I'm
So
like,
just because they're on my
but-
list of nicknames doesn't mean I like this team.
Yeah. But I couldn't deny the power of the nickname. Like the nicknames are so synonymous with the team that I was like, I don't care if I hate the team or not. This is their secondary nickname. It
Right.
is, you know?
So you've captured the essence of this topic right there with that statement.
Now, I'm going to go on to tell you a little bit more about like what I came up with in my research. Like the criteria. We always talk about like how you did a team meet the criteria to make your list. Like the nicknames have to stick. Like they've got to be like forever, you know? So, for example, a lot of these nicknames were born from a specific era of the team, you know?
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
So, for example, the New York Jets in the early 80s, they made all these sack records, right? With Mark Gastineau and Clucko and those teams, right? They blew up all the single season sack records so that the press called them the New York Sack Exchange. But like no one calls
I like
the Jets.
that, actually.
It is. No one calls the Jets now the New York Sack Exchange. Like that doesn't exist, you know? For the Minnesota Vikings in the 70s, the Purple People Eaters. Now, maybe some people in Minnesota still call them the Purple People Eaters a little bit, but it's not a name that is so synonymous with the current team like now that it's continued, you know? So all the ones that are on my list are still like sort of synonymous with the team. And I'm going to go a step further by so another example that I had written here is the Big Red Machine for the Cincinnati Reds of the 70s.
That's a good one.
That is a good one. But, I mean, that was Joe Morgan, Johnny Bench, you know, Dave Concepcion, like, Tony Perez, that was the Big Red Machine, you know? Joey Votto's not the Big Red Machine, you know?
He's also on the 60-day DL.
Okay. But, so sometimes the era-specific name, so there's going to be stuff in my list that were born from a specific era of a team, but that the name was so good that it stuck, right? So you're going to hear my list and then you're going to understand.
By the way, I think we're going to have a few the same on this one.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that was so interesting is these nicknames of teams that were born of an era somehow became the identity of the teams. Now, I'll explain it as I go. I'm going to explain it as I go, and you're going to sort of see what I say. But it's like a team has a specific nickname, and then you think of them as this hard, tough-nosed defensive team, right? That is the identity of the team in your minds, no matter what. Even if they're not, even if their defense sucks, you know, it's like, oh man, we're playing this team this week. Man, we better be careful. They have a great defense. Well, they really don't, you know? You know? So I think as I go, I'm going to explain that more. I didn't want to divulge too much on my list here, so I didn't really get in. Sorry if I'm being ambiguous, but as I reveal my top 5, it's going to become perfectly clear.
Some of mine are, like you said, they were born out of an era, and maybe they don't really call them that anymore, but I've included them in my list.
Right. Got it. I'm ready to start.
Okay, so I'll go first. I don't know who went first
Sure.
last time. I think I did, but since I thought of the topic, I think it's only fair that I should go first.
Number 5.
Okay, so the first one on my list is the New York Rangers, and they are sometimes referred to as the Broadway Blue Shirts.
Oh man, that's no good.
What I like about this one, and actually...
Have you ever referred... Wait. Have you ever referred to the Rangers as the Broadway Blue Shirts? Honestly.
I haven't, but I've heard many people refer to them as the Blue Shirts without the word Broadway. What I like about this, and also all of the ones on my list, the alternate nickname is nothing like their actual nickname. It's completely different. Like some teams, you know, like for example, the ones I used, the O's and the M's, they just basically shortened the actual name. But this is completely different. Broadway Blue Shirts. That's what I like about it.
I didn't like that one, to be perfectly honest.
there's a lot of times where you don't like mine. There's a lot of times.
I think your list is off to a bad start.
Okay, let's hear yours.
So, number 5 for me is the Los Angeles Lakers, and they are just simply referred to as Showtime.
That's not a bad one.
I mean, so everybody knows that Showtime was sort of the name that was from the 1980s Lakers, more like 79 to 91 when they had Magic Johnson. So anytime that Magic was on the team, that was Showtime, and it was all about their style. It was this run and gun, high-flying offense, fancy passing, really putting on a show for the fans. And you think that it's like the press or someone would have invented this, but actually it was the owner, Jerry Buss. Like when he bought the team, he was like, we want to make this into a show. We want to make the Lakers into a show just like Hollywood deserves. And he sort of came up with that name, like based on some other nightclub that he used to go to, you know? So it's really quite interesting. And, you know, it wasn't just the high flying offense that they wanted to sort of promote. It was the whole experience of going to a Laker game. So Buss wanted to make like a Hollywood atmosphere, and that's how like the Laker girls, the cheerleaders, started. You know, like they were the first team to sort of do that, like have that, not cheerleaders because that goes on, that's old, you know, like that's every high school team has cheerleaders, but like dancers, you know, like have a show at a show, you know, have a show during the halftime. So this is one of the examples there where I was saying, like, even though Magic retired a long time ago, the Lakers' identity as a team is still Showtime. Even with Shaq and Kobe, like they weren't doing behind the back passes. They weren't like, you know, like every era of Lakers basketball was like, oh, it's Showtime, even if it's not, you know, it's so that's sort of like where I was getting at before.
Wasn't there a show a few years ago about this?
Yeah.
Called
Showtime?
It's
an HBO show is like the rise. It's all about this whole era of like basically starts when they draft Magic and continues from there. Matthew watched season 1. He really liked it.
Yeah, I heard there was some controversy about it, that it wasn't accurate or whatever, but anyway.
Yeah, a lot of the players from that era didn't like how they were portrayed. And even like Jerry West didn't like how he was portrayed also.
Number 4.
Okay, so next on my list, I'm going to stay in New York. This time it's the New York Mets, and you know they won the World Series, I believe it was 1969, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And no one expected that to happen, so they started to call them the Amazing Mets. But now it's just the Amazins for short.
The Amazins. I thought you were going to go for the Miracle Mets, but the Amazins. Yeah.
So that's number 4 on my list.
It's a good one, but like again, so like because they won the World Series in '69 as this huge underdog, anytime they pull off a huge upset, even if tomorrow the Mets make a 5 have a 5-run comeback in tomorrow's game, the press is going to be like, the Amazins are back, you know, the Amazins.
Yeah, but that's what I like about it. Like they pull it out of the past, you know, they pull it out of the hat and they use it again.
So number 4 for me is the Philadelphia Flyers, also known as the Broad Street Bullies. Now, this again, born from the 1970s Flyers that racked up penalty minutes on a record pace and actually won the Stanley Cup twice in the mid-70s. The nickname was created by the newspaper reporters who just dubbed them the Broad Street Bullies. So Broad Street is the famous street in Philadelphia where the arena was, or I'm not sure if the Spectrum was on Broad Street anyways, but it is like one of the bigger, it's like a street synonymous with Philadelphia. And they coined the name the Broad Street Bullies because they were a team full of tough guys that racked up, penalties. And, Bobby Clark, he was a MVP and he was the 100-point guy, but he was also a ridiculously tough player. And then, of course, Dave Schultz. Dave Schultz has sometimes we talk about records that'll never be broken.
Yeah.
472 penalty minutes in one season.
I'm pretty sure that's never going to be broken.
So I just think that now, like, the Flyers could have this high-flying offensive team full of small little players that are all skilled, and somehow the newspapers are still going to call them the Broad Street Bullies, or they're going to still have this reputation as a tough team, even if they're not,
For sure. Good pick.
Number 3.
So next on my list, I'm going to continue to stay in New York. And
Whoa.
this time I'm going to go to the New York Yankees. And everyone calls them the Bronx Bombers. And even though that nickname was born many, many years ago when they used to hit a ton of home runs, they still hit a ton of home runs now. So the nickname is still very accurate.
So number 3 on my list is the Bronx Bombers. I love when this happens. I love when it happens. There's times where we have stood up the same stuff on our list, but somehow when they're in the right order, it's beautiful. It's just a beautiful thing.
It's synchronicity.
I hate the New York Yankees. I hate them with a passion. But this is a great, alternate nickname. It's great. The Bronx Bombers. And where I said before that sometimes this becomes the identity of your team, and maybe your team doesn't live up to it. Maybe they're not this home run hitting team anymore. They always are. The Yankees, think about it. Think about it throughout the eras, right? So basically the term Bronx Bombers became popular in the 1930s, and a newspaper reporter took the name from Joe Louis, the boxer, who was called the Brown Bomber. And they had a famous fight at Yankee Stadium. Joe Louis' most famous fight was against Max Schmeling. It was at Yankee Stadium in 1936. And that's after that, a newspaper reporter was like, oh, the Yankees became the Bronx Bombers, right? But just think about all the Yankee teams like Ruth, Gehrig, DiMaggio, Mantle, Maris, Reggie Jackson, and then now go to current day, Aaron Judge, right? They are a home run hitting team in any era of the Yankees. That's their identity, and that's the identity that the fans love, and that's the identity that the team actually strives for,
And so talking about alternate nicknames, some teams have multiple alternate nicknames, and I think sometimes the Yankees are referred to as the Evil Empire.
I think they were always considered the Evil Empire until the Red Sox beat them. And that first Red Sox team in 2004, they weren't, that was more like a huge upset and the end of the curse and all this. But then the Red Sox went on to win several more World Series after with a just as high or even higher payroll as the Yankees. So the Evil Empire kind of applies to
the Boston Red Sox now.
Yeah, even the Dodgers. What about the Dodgers?
Right, of course.
Like I told you last week, the Dodgers payroll is the size of a small country's GDP.
For sure.
Number 2.
Okay, so number 2, you mentioned it. It's the Broad Street Bullies. So you pretty much said everything I was going to say. One thing is about this nickname. Now, sometimes in not even just in hockey, but in other sports, like in basketball, for example, and I even used this example when Duke lost to, was it Tennessee in March Madness? Yeah. Tennessee was playing like the Broad Street Bullies. I actually said that sentence to you. So I'm now taking a nickname from a hockey team and I'm using it for another sport. That's how prevalent this nickname is.
That's a great one. It's so true. You texted me exactly that. You're like, they're playing like the Broad Street Bullies,
And you knew what I meant. You knew exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, look, Philadelphia, I'm an Eagles fan. Philadelphia wants their teams to be tough teams. That's what they want. They want the Flyers to be the Broad Street Bullies. They want the Eagles to be this team that's going to just rip you apart on defense. Like they at one point they had Reggie White and these type of players, right? Brian Dawkins. And, that's even the Phillies in baseball. But baseball, you can't be tough. Can you really be tough in baseball?
It's hard. It's hard to be tough in baseball.
It's hard. But look at the team from last year that made it to the World Series. You had this guy, Bryce Harper, who was just this arrogant piece of garbage, right? Who's going to hit a home run and then look you straight in the eye and say, come and get me, type of thing. That's the type of players they want and teams they want. So it's interesting how it works like that. So number 2, for me, this is the classic example of a team's entire history taking on the persona of a nickname. It's the Chicago Bears, who in the 1930s and 40s had such an incredible defense. and they call them the Monsters of the Midway. And then,
That's right. I forgot about this one.
and I can still hear the voice of like NFL films, you know, like going back and showing you like the '85 Bears defense, the Monsters of the Midway, you know, like it's like
And you
these
see
old
the old
movies
footage,
and
the grainy footage that they used to use.
yeah, Dick Butkus and all this. So I mean, the name Monsters of the Midway was coined in the 30s and 40s when the Bears were this like very, very successful team. They actually stole the name from the University of Chicago team. They played in the name of the park where they played at the University of Chicago was called the Midway. So, and actually there's an airport in Chicago called Midway now, actually, like the second airport of Chicago.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, and then the name stuck, right? And then somehow the Monsters of the Midway became the Bears' identity as this super tough team, like all through their history, right? In fact, so much that in 2013, the Chicago Bears actually formally trademarked the name Monsters of the Midway. So like how you said at the very, very beginning, like the teams this is not their official name. Technically, the Monsters of the Midway is owned by the Bears now, right? They want that name. And I always find it so interesting because like Chicago wants their Bears to be a team that's feared, that's so tough in terms of toughness and defense. They're always going to be synonymous with this great defensive team. Like you can go and play the Bears last year, you know, last year the Bears stank. The last 2 years, they're terrible. And still, somehow, when your team is playing the Bears, you're like, oh, we better be careful. The Bears have a good defense. Well, no, they don't. They really don't have a good defense. But in your mind, because they're the Chicago Bears, they must have a good defense, you know? But it's like playing tricks with your mind, these nicknames, you know?
Number 1.
This is the reason I thought of doing this list, because I was watching highlights the other day, and the announcer referred to this team by this alternate nickname. And I'm like, what does that even mean? I didn't even understand what it meant. Like, what team is he talking about? I honestly didn't even know what team he was talking about. And I had to think about it. Like, what? And then I had to think about it. I finally figured it out. So I'm going to tell you the alternate nickname, and let's see if you can even tell me what team I'm talking about.
But isn't the point of this list to, like, if it's number 1 on your list, like, it should be synonymous with the team, no?
Or it should be just such a clever nickname that you actually have to think about it.
All right, let's hear it.
So it's the Pale Hose.
Oh, that's the White Sox.
Yes, but it took me forever to figure that out.
Yeah, the White Sox have a bunch of nicknames. Like, yeah,
yes,
so that's because they have also like there's like the North Side in Chicago and the South Side, right? Chicago has a bunch of like little intricacies like that. So the Pale Hose, yeah, that's not bad.
I didn't know at first. I'm like, who are the Pale Hose? Because I'm thinking hose like a hose, not like socks, right? And I was also thinking like pale like a bucket, not like a light color, right? That's what I was thinking.
You needed to see the spelling to know.
Because when you hear it, you don't see how it's spelled.
Right.
So anyway, so that's my number 1.
So now, like, if you're texting me, like, let's say the White Sox are in the playoffs this year and whatever, and are you going to text me or like, are you watching the Pale Hose game at 4
Now
o'clock?
I will,
like,
yes.
I mean, that seems ridiculous. So I'm kind of shocked that your number 1 is not the same as mine. You mentioned it in the example that you gave at the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
And that's the Montreal Canadiens being known as the Habs.
Well, I said at the beginning, I was giving examples of teams that are not in my list.
It deserves to be number 1 because it's so synonymous with the team. It's almost like it is their real nickname.
It almost is, yes.
You know, we did, when the Canadians were on their run to the Stanley Cup final a few years ago, we did episodes like after every game. Well, except for at one point because we thought we cursed them. But you know, we titled the podcast episode Habs versus Leafs, Habs versus Vegas. Like we didn't even write the word Canadians. Like everyone knows what the Habs are. You know, when you go to the game, what's the cheer that you hear at the Bell Center? It's Go Habs Go, right? I mean, this is the name of the team. It is part of the name of the team. And it has nothing to do with the culture. It's not like the Flying Frenchmen, which, you know, they were called in, you know, the 50s or the 70s. It's not that. It's not bleu, blanc, rouge, like that's also another name. Canadians have a lot of, obviously, when you have over 100 years of history, there's a lot of names. But the Habs is just, it's just synonymous with the team. And it was originated in the 20s, by the way.
Right, because I think it originally was called Les Habitants.
Well, I mean...
And they shortened it.
Well, this is like a little bit of an urban legend, So what I read was the nickname has its roots by mistake when Tex Rickard, the former owner of Madison Square Garden in New York in 1924, in an interview, told a reporter that the H in the Canadiens logo stood for habitant. Now, habitant is like an original settler of Quebec from France. Like that's the meaning of the word habitant, in case people don't realize. But that's not even true. The H in the Canadiens logo officially stands for hockey, Club de Hockey, right?
I'm glad you mentioned this.
Yeah. So, but after 1924, the habitant name, because of this little error in an interview, started to catch on, and now here we are in 2023, almost 100 years after that interview, and we are calling them the Habs, which is absolutely incredible.
And now there's a soup called Habitant.
Well, there is a soup. Yes, there's a brand of soup, Habitant. Yeah, it's great. I love it. So there are some others that I had like honorable mentions, Josh. Like you mentioned some of them, and we mentioned some of the others. I'm only going to mention one. There's a lot of bad ones, like people like the Florida Marlins called the Fish, or the Tampa Bay Lightning called the Bolts. Like these are not so good. The worst one that I can't stand, that's cringe, is people that call the Dallas Cowboys America's team. That's a disaster. And then there's some, era specific ones that I mentioned before, but others like the Bad Boys, the Pistons teams,
that's
Isaiah Thomas
I like
teams.
that one.
Yeah, that's a good one, but it's very specific to like Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Bill Laimbeer, right? And then, like the Rams teams, of the Super Bowl winning Rams teams, the greatest show on turf. That's what they were called.
That's a good one, yeah.
With Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk. And I mentioned, the Chicago Bears of Monsters of the Midway. There's one that's born from a Saturday Night Live skit, The Bears.
That's right.
Right? I mean, that's still a great one, actually. And there's one actually that could have made the list, but the official team nickname has changed, so it's no good anymore. And that's when the Cleveland Indians, now called the Cleveland, what are they
Guardians. They're called the Guardians now.
Guardians, so the worst name ever. When the Cleveland Indians, people used to refer to them as the Tribe, which I also thought was actually a good extra nickname.
Yeah, Tribe made it to my honorable mentions as well. I do like that.
Yeah, so we can't call them the Tribe anymore if they're the Guardians. I don't know what they're going to be called. Maybe they're called like Brinks or like security guards. Like, what are they? I don't know.
Security guards.
I don't know.
A few that didn't make my list, but I liked. The Los Angeles Angels are called the Halos.
That's a good one, actually.
It is.
That's a good one. Yeah.
The Gonzaga Bulldogs are called the Zags sometimes.
That's a good one, too. Because actually, I told someone last year that the Gonzaga team name was the Bulldogs, and they didn't believe me.
Well, they actually have one of their jerseys does say Zags on it.
Zags. Yeah.
Milwaukee Brewers, the Brew Crew.
Yeah.
And then, these are not really, that intelligent, but the Houston Astros were called the Stros, and the Montreal Expos were called the Spos.
Yeah. Actually, I have another one for the Montreal Expos, only in French. Nos Amours. Like that you used to see in print a lot in the French papers.
That's true.
It means, for people who need translation, it means like
our loves. Our loves.
Like, and I think it was just born, I think that started like in 1969, the first year of the Expos. The French newspapers were calling them like Nos Amours, like it became like a love affair with the team, So
we'll be right back with some final thoughts.
You're listening to Unscripted.
Do you know John Hyatt songs?
Maybe you know them from being covered by Roseanne Cash, Three Dog Night, the Neville Brothers, Emmylou Harris, Eric Clapton, B.B. King, Jeff Healey, Bonnie Raitt, or literally hundreds of others.
Maybe you have some of his albums on your shelf or in your cow-horned Cadillac right now.
I'm Jesse Jackson,
And I'm Sylvan Brough.
and we're going to dive in from A to Z. Join us on the Perfectly Good podcast.
We're going to discuss all of your favorites and uncover some forgotten gems, from Aces Up Your Sleeve to Zero House.
Rate and debate every John Hyatt song on the Perfectly Good podcast. Have a little faith.
Unscripted with Skip and Josh is available wherever you listen to podcasts. If you listen to the show through Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. To interact with the show, send an email to skipandjoshshow@gmail.com. Follow the show on Twitter and go to Facebook to like the show page. And now, some final thoughts from the guys.
There's something that happened this week, Josh, on Twitter. Well, it didn't happen on Twitter, but I found out about it on Twitter.
Well, isn't that where you find out everything?
A lot, yeah. Do you have like the MLB app, by the way?
You mean the one that tells you scores and stats?
Yes, exactly.
I don't have that one, no. I have the one where you can purchase tickets.
Right. So apparently, users of the MLB app this week, if you followed certain teams, if you followed the Houston Astros or the Washington Nationals, the Padres, it's not clear about what it was. The Braves, there's certain teams. Like if you say, give me notifications about scores, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
People were getting notifications from like 1972.
Really?
I have the screenshots. Astros at Braves. Astros beat Braves 5-3. Winning pitcher, Don Wilson, 13-9. Losing pitcher, Mike McQueen, 0-3.
That's insane. I mean, someone must have done that intentionally. There's no way that could have happened by accident.
I don't know. The Expos beat the Astros 6-4. Winning pitcher, Steve Renko, 10-11. Losing pitcher, Jack Billingham, 5-9.
Because like smartphones and notifications didn't even exist back then. So it's not like
I know.
that had to have been done intentionally.
So people were getting spammed. There's so many. I have only one screenshot of like this person has their team is Cleveland, which is even more bizarre because there's nothing to do with Cleveland in these scores, but you could see like the logo that's there. But there's tons of screenshots of people posting like, why am I getting these updates from like the 1972? I think it's 1972. I'm not even 100% sure, but it's definitely the early 70s. If Steve Renko is on the Expos, I mean, it has to be of that era.
Did Major League Baseball explain how this happened or why it happened?
I didn't like really dig into it much more than just the humor in like the weird updates coming. I just thought it was hysterical.
It is quite funny actually. I don't know. I would be stunned if I got that on my phone.
Imagine you get a thing. The Astros beat the Braves. They're like, wait a minute, the Astros didn't play the Braves last night. Winning pitcher, what? That guy's has been on our team since 40 years ago. Like imagine, it's kind of wild. All right, that's all I got. What do you got?
So I mentioned the Goldberg season finale. I finally watched it.
Yeah, how was it?
And as expected, the season finale wasn't good. The best episode of this past season was, as I told you, the second to last episode where all of Adam's ex-girlfriends make an appearance. So if you're only going to watch one episode from the last season, that's the one to watch.
But you also told me that a good one to watch is this one where it's something about the Flyers. Where the Flyers make it to the Stanley Cup
that's
final.
right. Yes, there was an episode involving the Philadelphia Flyers, and that was a while ago. I thought you had already watched that one.
No, I haven't seen it, no.
So yeah, you should watch that one, yes. But you see, you're going to like it, and I liked it for a specific reason that most people won't care about.
Okay.
Because it involves hockey.
So specifically hockey related. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's it. The Goldsbergs is over. It's done.
It's over. It's done. Yeah. It had a good run, 10 years.
It's 10 years?
Yeah.
That's wild. I mean, that's amazing. Is their spinoff still on?
No, that's long gone.
It was like a 90s, right? Where they came back as a teacher.
Exactly.
She came back as a teacher.
Yeah.
All right, well, I mean, it's sort of like sitcoms are sort of over. Like those shows don't exist really anymore.
It's hard to make a good show on regular network television these days. It's really hard.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. Well, I loved talking about those alternate, secondary, whatever you want to call them, nicknames of teams. We always learn a lot about the history of sports and how things come about, and I always find it interesting. Nicknames nicknames in general is like a fantastic phenomenon. Like anybody who knows us personally knows like our friend group. We all We all have nicknames.
Well, yeah, I don't know if anyone that listens to this show knows your actual name.
People do because they follow me on Facebook. Avi is my first name, really.
Okay.
But Skip, people think like, oh, you're using Skip just for the podcast. No, Skip is the name that people call me. There are a segment of people here that I'm friends with that actually think that is my name. Like that, people don't know that, we were at a mutual friend's kid's bar mitzvah. And one of the people there introduced me to his family. They're like, hey, this is Skip. Like that's what they know me as, So, yeah, but nicknames is always fascinating. It's an incredible, like, they take on a life of their own. Once you have a nickname, whether you like it or not, that's the nickname.
Many years ago when, we were still living with our parents and all our friends were living with their parents, I called a friend of ours and his mother answered the phone. And I said, oh, hi, it's Josh. Is Mike home? And
Right.
she's like, and I know her. I've met her many times. I've met Mike's mom many times. So she's like, who's Josh? I'm like, what do you mean? I was just at your house last night. How do you not know who I am? She's like, I don't know any Josh. I said, it's Cubby. She's like, oh, well, why didn't you just say so? This actually happened.
I love that. So all that to say is, have fun with the nicknames. Great talking to you this week, and I'll speak to you next time.
Have a great week.